The Dershow.
So for the last 60 years, I've been using what's called the Socratic method, and that is the hypothetical method. You come up with hypothetical cases and you test your students' commitment to principles based on the hypothetical cases. You vary the facts to test their commitment to principles. So here's the hypothetical. It's such a simple and obvious one. It's 1955, 1956. I'm in college. A year or two after Brown versus Board of Education, that required all public schools to desegregate. And so you have Ole Miss and you have the University of Alabama and you have George Wallace, and they're all saying, we have academic freedom. You can't make us integrate. You can't make us treat Black students equally. We have our traditions. We fought a civil war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We believe in our First Amendment right to allow Klansmen to come on the campus wearing hoods and masks and berate Black students. That's our First Amendment rights. Let's assume we're back in 1955 instead of 2025. And you have Ku Klux Klan people coming on the campus wearing their hoods and screaming the N-word and saying to Blacks, go back to Africa, and saying you're not equal intellectually, saying all those horrible, horrible, horrible things. And let's assume the federal government said to Ole Miss and University of Alabama, hey, we're going to cut out your federal funding. There wasn't much federal funding back then, but we're going to take away your tax exemption unless you change, unless you start enforcing our laws, unless you start saying you can't just come on the campus and harass Black students. And George Wallace gets up and says, wait a minute, we have a First Amendment right. We're entitled to say go back. And you are. You're entitled to say go back to Africa. That's First Amendment protected, but you're not entitled necessarily to get money if you're saying go back to Africa. So my question is, where would the courts come out if the hypothetical were based on 1955, 1956 instead of 2025? And where would all the liberals be? I can tell you where the liberals would be. I can tell you all where the progressives would be. I can tell you where the professors at Harvard who are suing Harvard would be. They'd be on the side of the federal government saying, shut down that goddamn university. Stop funding University of Alabama. Stop funding Ole Miss. Make them get tough on Klansmen and racist students and racist professors who are teaching white supremacy. So what's the principle? What's the principle? Forget about what side you're on the racial issue. What's the principle? Is there a principle that says that the federal government should not interfere with the substance of what students are saying against other students, or the substance of demonstrations, or the content of demonstrations, or the content of what teachers are teaching? Is that the principle? If that's the principle, then you have to allow the Southern schools to continue to harass Black students and to tell them to go back to Africa and to allow white supremacy to be taught. I don't think there's a single liberal that I know of that would support that. They would all be on the side of the federal government coming in and telling the schools what to do. So is there a difference? Yeah, there's a difference. In one case, the people who are being harassed are Black. In the other case, they're Jewish. Is that a distinction with a difference? Is that constitutionally permissible? No, it's not. And so what's the principle? Is the principle that the government is never allowed to try to influence academic policies and academic actions by withholding funds or withholding tax benefits? Is that the principle? Of course it's not, because you wouldn't apply that principle to Southern racist schools in the 1950s. Is the principle that you can discriminate against Jews but not Blacks? No, that's not the principle. So what's the principle? Is the principle that if Trump does it, it's wrong, but if anybody else does it, it's right? No, that can't be the principle. So who's going to win this lawsuit? Not Harvard. They're not going to win this lawsuit. I think it'll be settled, but if it goes to litigation and gets up to the Supreme Court of the United States, I do not believe they're going to win this lawsuit. They lost the lawsuit when it came to anti-Asian admission policies, which were also anti-Jewish, and in some respects just anti-white discrimination policies. They lost that lawsuit with this Supreme Court. And I suspect they will lose the lawsuit that they brought today. Can't be sure. Never know. First of all, it probably wouldn't get the Supreme Court for 2 years, and who knows who will be on the Supreme Court in 2 years. Will Justice Thomas still be there? Don't know. Will Justice Alito still be there? Those are the two most likely not to be on the Supreme Court in the short and middle term, and they are the two strongest supporters of the government in a case like this. So it's up in the air. We're not sure. Let's put that aside. Let's put aside for a minute who will win the lawsuit. Who's right? As a matter of principle, who's right? As a matter of principle, should the federal government be funding a university with $53 billion that is not doing enough to fight anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and other forms of bigotry? Is that the right thing? How far should the federal government go? Should they tinker with admission policies, with hiring policies? Should they micromanage what's taught in the classroom? Obviously, a balance has to be struck here. You can't allow what happened in the South in 1956, 57, and you can't allow what happened in Harvard campus on October 7th and October 8th, 2023. No, you can't allow 22 groups at Harvard, including Amnesty International, before Israel fired a single shot and had a single person in Gaza. You can't allow schools, these groups, to say Hamas was not at fault. It's all Israel's fault that 1,200 innocent Israelis were killed and 250 of them were captured. You can allow that if you can also allow people to make comparable statements against African Americans, against gays. But you don't allow that. You fire people for misgendering people. There's no First Amendment at Harvard. There's no freedom of speech at Harvard. Let's go back even many years before that, 1930s at Harvard. Harvard was a bastion of Nazism in the 1930s. Harvard had anti-Jewish quotas. They had anti-Italian quotas, anti-Catholic quotas, anti-Black quotas. They never even heard of gay people. They wouldn't admit somebody who was openly gay. Harvard was a horrible, horrible, racist, bigoted place. They welcomed Nazis. They went and sent a delegation to the University of Heidelberg, which had excluded Jewish professors and Jewish students. But Harvard said, "Okay, that's fine. We're gonna welcome that." What if a federal government had said, "No, wait a minute, Harvard, you're discriminating against Jews. You're discriminating against others. We're not funding you." Would that have been the right thing to do? Yes, it would have been the right thing to do. I would have supported it. And so what's the principle? What's the principle? The principle is that the federal government does have a role to play in preventing discrimination and ensuring equality. But it may go too far in trying to micromanage the university. Look, I have two proposals. Number one, I want to end all these programs. I want to end DEI. 500 schools have now said we won't end DEI. DEI is a disaster. It's against diversity. It's against inclusion. It's against equality. It's racist and anti-Semitic and anti-American and anti-meritocratic to its core. I would also end every single one of these special studies departments. I would end any department that deals with women's rights, women's issues, gay rights, gay issues, racial, anything, Jewish studies. End it. End Jewish studies. End Holocaust studies. There's no room in universities for these specialized departments, which are totally unacademic, and they turn immediately into advocacy departments. When you look at all the statements that were issued on October 8th, October 9th, October 10th, the vast majority of them came from gay studies departments, women's studies departments, Native American studies departments, Southeast Asian studies department. It's all horrible, and it all should end. And we're not going to see universities restore their status as the greatest universities in the world as long as these special programs continue to exist. I would end all funding of all universities, all universities. No university gets a single nickel. Who gets the money? Research scientists. Hey, I can help cure cancer. Oh, you get money. I can help diabetes. Yeah, we'll give you money. I can stop Alzheimer's. Be our guest. Get the money. But we're not giving money to Joseph Massad, the head of the Mideast Studies Department, who calls on a student and the student speaks, and Joseph Massad, the head of this department, says, "You speaking with an Israeli accent? You cannot speak unless you are willing to admit you're a war criminal." Why should we be spending money on the Carr Center for Human Rights at Harvard Law School, which has nothing to do with human rights? It only promotes left-wing political ideologies. Should money be spent on supporting the National Lawyers Guild, which announces itself to be the legal arm of the Palestinian cause and really is the legal arm of Hamas? We have to have targeted defunding, or more specifically, targeted funding. Let's fund only research that's in the national interest and that's neutral and non-ideological. Yes, defund National Public Radio. You want to put on funding for opera, for music, that's okay. As long as it's not political. You say one word that's partisan or political, your defunding is cut off completely. The American taxpayer should not be funding ideological, partisan causes, whether they call themselves educational or anything else. So I'm on a rampage on this one. And I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But boy, if you want to see American universities restore themselves to the status they once had and could have again, you have to stop funding all these partisan, ideological, one-sided programs. And you have to get back to universities teaching neutral, objective, basic science, basic social science, but not ideology.